Okay, we are live. Good afternoon. We are in Senate Committee on Institutions. Today is Friday, January 9th, 2026. And we are here today to have an overview of the Capitol bill. And we're going to hear from our staff, staff that we share with our colleagues and the House. And we're going to first hear from JFO and then, which is Joint Fiscal Office, and then we're going to hear from our Legislative Council. Okay, and Mr. Moore, also known as Scott, would you and identify yourself?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. For the record, Scott Moore, Joint Fiscal Office. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Senator Benson, welcome. Sure. Earlier, I had given Ken a copy of the spreadsheet, so you should all have it in front of you, looks like you do. And so, Senator Benson, I'm going to speak a little bit, maybe very layman's terms, but it's your first time going through some things. So everyone else may think my apologies if I sound a little bit pedantic, but I just want to make things easier because it's your first time looking at this stuff. With that said, the capital bill itself is a 2-year bill. It's how we fund capital projects. The state owns, correct me if I'm wrong, 240 some odd buildings, and how we pay for the buildings themselves, the maintenance, and everything is through the capital bill. So the capital bill itself, the language, I gave you a copy of this earlier. And then we have the infamous spreadsheet. So essentially, JFO looks at the numbers on the spreadsheet. I'm the one that will help put them all together, make sure we're on task, make sure we spend no more than what has been authorized for us to spend. The different powers that be, at this time we have $100 million to spend on capital bonding. And we're going to do $50 million a year for 2 years because this is a 2-year bill, which is a little bit unusual than a lot of bills. So that said, when we go through and look at this, we have a couple different components. We do have the FY26 component, then we have the FY27 component. We also have the bonded component and a cash component. So essentially what we have done here is there's a pay-go portion of the capital bill where there's money in the cash fund that we can use to spend on some projects. So some things are funded by cash, some things will be funded by bonding, some things are funded by vote. So as you walk through the spreadsheet, you'll see that in here. The language itself also spells that all out. It's a little bit easier sometimes to follow along on the spreadsheet because you can see 26 cash and bonded, 27 cash and bonded, etc. So typically when we look at this, John Gray is the legislative counsel. He's the one who'll go through and look at the words, the language. I'm the one who looks at the numbers, and he, together, and I, we do all of the staff work behind the scenes.
And we'll get our binders from the administration.
Right.
So next week when the governor has his budget, or 2 weeks from now.
I think it's the 21st, something like that. 21st.
Right, so that's when we'll get binders that'll have the language of the capital bill that's proposed and also the proposed.
Just an event, and you are entering into this halfway through this capital bill. So the very first thing that happens with any of these bills, the governor makes a recommendation as to what should be spent for these different projects. Then it goes to the House committee. The House committee looks at that and says, okay, great. You said you wanted $1 million for this. Well, we think it should be $2 million, or it should be $500,000 and make those changes. Then it comes here to the Senate. Then it becomes our bill here in the Senate. And we either agree or don't agree with what the House does. We make our changes. And then if there are major differences, we'll have a conference committee to work those differences out. Then it goes, of course, to the House body and the Senate body, and once it all gets passed, then it goes back to the governor. So what you're seeing here is what we decided last year was going to be the bill. It doesn't mean we can't make changes. So for instance, as we start going through some of these things, we're going to see that maybe the very first line item, they have $8 million to spend, but you know what? They went through, they did all the work for the past 6 months. And they're saying we only need to spend $7 million. So there's $1 million that we maybe could use from that line item on a different line item. So a lot of that process you'll see as we go through this. I don't want to confuse you, but there are lots of different moving parts. But at the end of the day, it's my job to make sure we don't spend any more money than we have allocated to us to spend. So quick, easy. Yeah. So far, so good. So the capital bill language we talked about a little bit. The first section is the legislative intent. So that first page, page and a bit is about the intent of the bill. It kind of talks about what the bill is meant to do. Section 2 of this bill, the actual language, will get into the numbers. So my spreadsheet will always start with section 2. So going from left to right, the first column is the line item, just so if I were to say to you, hey, Senator Benson, we're talking about the State House reappointing, that's line 10 on my spreadsheet. Just so you have that have set your parents. The second column is this is the section in the actual bill. So as we're looking through this, we'd say, okay, well, where do I find the words that go behind this? There's maybe more in there that talks about we're going to be doing some more work or whatever. So section 2, subsection C, subsection 3, subsection 3, whatever. So that's the next column. It's just to orient yourself to the language from the spreadsheet. The third column, this is the project description from the agencies. So you can see this. My first section is labeled section 2, the agency of administration. And inside the agency of administration, we have buildings and general services. And then these are the list of all of their progress. So line 1, we can see statewide major maintenance. And I don't necessarily know all of the ins and outs of every one of these projects as to what is happening with, for instance, the Newport Northern State Correctional Facility, what they're actually doing, how they're replacing the roof and the boilers. I don't have all of that stuff in my head. Buildings and grounds, Joe Asia does, he's amazing. But so if you have specific questions, we might need to hold off to ask that agency as to what that question might be. But with that said, the very first line is major maintenance. This is essentially what they do. There might be a boiler that needs to be replaced. It could be, pipes that froze, that kind of stuff. They have these different projects in here. So in FY26 for the bonded dollars, we said that they had 60 million, 6.4 million.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Scott.
Oh, no.
I thought I heard that Senator Plunkett wanted to get on.
He's not able to.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, we was in here earlier. So,
Yes,
okay.
thank you.
Yeah, well, sorry.
Oh, no, by all means. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know Senator Plunkett did mention he might try to.
Yes, he was going to, but he's not able to.
Yeah. So instead of Benson, looking at this column B here, we have roughly $6.5 million set aside in bonding for the statewide major maintenance. Then in FY26, the cash fund is another $1.5 million set aside. Now under column C, it does say FY26 cash fund, then it says section 19. Just to give you an idea, in the language itself, we have the very first sections are all the bonded dollars. Then one of the last sections is the cash section. That section is set aside in the language. It happens to be section 19 in the actual language. But because some of these projects do have bonded and cash, sometimes it's easier to know how much money's at play if we just list it here. So this column C really is a separate section in the language itself. I know that can be a little bit confusing, but what we did here was just try to make it easier to see across the board. Column D is the FY27 proposed budget. That was proposed where the governor recommended last year at this time. That's what we're going to be playing with this year. Those are the numbers we're going to change. Or maybe not change. It really kind of depends on what that new binder we're going to get from the governor's office to set. They might say, you know what, you all gave us, 8.5 million. We really need 3 million, or we need 13 million when they act. Those are the numbers are going to change. So these are not, none of this is quite frankly set in stone, because we can make changes to this as we need.
Right, can I just, just to be clear, so FY26, it ends June 26. Just to be clear, so we're in FY26. Cash fund is a relatively new item. We've just had it for maybe 5 years. So we're figuring out how to show that, because it does complicate things. And then we are going to look at whether or not all of the FY26 money is going to be used. Right, Scott?
Correct. So one of
And
the
so
things
that could be why we change one of the the 27 numbers also.
So one of the things that the House does is they have a subcommittee of the House committee to look at any money that may still be left over, because they've had 6 months now to spend money for FY 26. Well, maybe the estimate was too high. They've come back and said, we don't need this much money. Or maybe they'll come back and say we need more. But they have a subcommittee that goes through and questions the agencies to say, hey, we gave you 8 million 2 years ago. You're still using it? Can we have something back? What's the deal? So we might make changes to these because they may have had other money, or the commissioner may have moved some money around from project to project as need be.
And we don't do that in this committee, but we do get the results of the House work.
Yeah.
Because we just, they do it all day. We just have a day.
So our charge is really looking at the overall big picture.
Yes, yes.
Got it.
Then we get to column E. This is the total of the bonded dollars. So essentially it's the sum of column B and column D. And then column F is the total of everything, cash and bonded FY 26 and FY 27. One thing you'll note that is there is no cash column for FY 27 at the moment.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, that's because we haven't got it yet. So in a couple of weeks, when the governor's office gives us that binder, they're going to give us their proposed numbers. They'll put it on a spreadsheet. And then we'll have essentially 4 columns, we'll have FY 26 bonded, FY 26 cash, FY 27 bonded, and FY 27 cash. So the spreadsheet gets complex quickly. At the end of the day, it is a spreadsheet, so there's a way for us to keep track of the money. This is a guide, it's not the law. The language is the law, right? So this is kind of a great guide, but House uses it all the time. That's how they keep track of money moving in and money moving out. So the same basic principle, looking at line 2, statewide planning, we use contingency. There was no bonded dollars in FY 26. And that's a decision made at the department level. The House and the Senate concurred with that. For whatever reason, there was, the choice was not to use bonded dollars. Probably because this is a great category for the use of cash. To give you a little bit of a background on the cash fund. If we think about it, the cash fund was designed for pay-go stuff. So as an engineer background yourself, you know, there's often, for instance, design and planning phases. And so the idea was, do we really want to bond for a 20-year general obligation bond for an architect for $50,000? You know, when we know that it's just a planning phase. So the idea is the cash fund can be used to help pay those kind of smaller projects and then not incur interest on that. So that's kind of the idea about the cash fund. So this is just this planning use and contingency happens to be a great example of when you might use cash versus bonded dollars. But again, it's not the decision I made, it's the decision that the governor had given to the House and the Senate, and the House and the Senate concurred whatever that decision was. But they do happen to have $250,000 in FY 27 bonded, for a total of $500,000 in this capital bill cycle for that particular line item. And then we watch, rinse, and repeat the whole first section. So,
Well, and here's 3 acre, excuse me.
Yeah. so then we get.
But that's just for state properties, I believe, right?
Yeah.
The 3 acre parcel compliance and line 4.
So you can see the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines are statewide projects. And then we do have a couple of projects that are in Rutland specifically, a project at Pittsburgh, Montpelier projects, Waterbury and Burlington. So, we try to keep things lumped together so you can kind of see a little bit how easy it is. So if we had them all listed alphabetically versus, you know, geographically, this happens to be mostly geographical. Why going from on the bottom there, I don't know. That's the way the bill language was created. But so at the end of the day, the agency administration is going to be given a total of $32 million, $32.1 million in this capital bill cycle, those 2 years. 13 million, 13.7 million in FY 26 for bonded, 2.5 million in cash, and then roughly 16 million in FY 27. So that's kind of how the spreadsheet works. We can talk it through section by section, look at some totals. I don't want to bore the audience with every single number that I'm happy to list, but that first section is buildings and general services. Commissioner Manoli We'll be happy to come and talk. And Joe Asia is the director of, I'm looking at Paul Joe's side of construction, design and construction. So Joe's a great resource for these things. In fact, yesterday he came in and gave an overview to the House Committee on these projects as to where they are, what's happening, how much money they have left over, how much more money they might need, that kind of stuff. So I do encourage you, as we go through this, if you have downtime, you can watch some of this testimony. Joe did a great job. Always does a great job to explain the projects in detail. There's always something I learn about this kind of stuff. I never knew there was such a thing now as stainless steel rebar. Having stainless steel rebar might help spalling when it comes to concrete. Who knew? I didn't know.
I didn't know that either.
So
Well, and we'll have Joe in.
this second section is the Agency of Human Services. This is where we're going to be doing more of the correctional facility kind of things. So they will also get some money set aside for them for use in the correction centers. Same idea. We have statewide. We have one in Rutland, St. John Racing, Collins, and Newport. Each of the facilities kind of has line item depending upon what they might be needing specifically. And again, we have here roughly 6.2 million in FY26 bonded. We also have FY26. There's no cash associated with these things. And FY27, another 4.8 million. So roughly $13 million for the correctional facilities section, if you will.
Just a quick question, if I may. Human Services was into Health and Human Services, giving us a little presentation this morning, and they were indicating that as a result of some of the changes on the federal side and the administration of new rules, that they anticipated like a 30% increase in their workload, roughly. And so that I assume, assuming if the governor agrees, that would be reflected then in what we would see as a change in the budget.
So what we might see, for instance, I'll pick one, looking at line 20, the statewide plan design is probably not the best one, but just as an example, what they might do is they'll come back and they'll say, okay, we have $1 million in bonded for FY27. And not that line item necessarily matches what you were saying when they asked for, but what they might come through and say is we're going to need more money for something. And then what they'll say, we had $1 million, but we really need 1.5. And then again, that topic you mentioned versus this line item don't necessarily go together, but just mechanically how that spreadsheet would work. They would present something, they would say, hey, last year's capital bill, line 20 column D was $1 million. But now because of cost of materials or whatever else, we need 1.5 million. So they'll have a change or adjustment. And then we will go back and say, we agreed. And you told us you need more money for concrete, copper, roofing materials, whatever happens to be, labor for the construction periods, whatever. And then that will be reflected on here. We'll agree or disagree and give them the money's needed. My apologies.
No, not at all.
I just want to help, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to help John as well, with what your other committee is looking at. You're probably looking at the operating budgets of what they're doing, where we're actually looking at what we're trying to do to their buildings. Different, same pew, different seat. So, yeah, so it might not reflect in that way.
Yeah.
Thanks,
That's great.
And I want to add, Agency of Human Services is by far the largest agency, and I think Corrections is the largest department in that agency. So what we do is primarily corrections. I don't think we've done any buildings. I mean, there probably are some buildings that the Agency of Human Services is in. But I don't know
where they
if
actually are housed. I'm not sure where.
yeah,
Where they actually.
like the water
Complex.
they might be there, but we have it under Buildings and General Services because that's the agency that actually does the work. But you're right.
So following what Russ says, I understand it, what Russ just said. So unless that 30% increase required more physical space or building modification, we wouldn't see it in this.
I think that you're accurate with that. I'm just trying to think of an example. and maybe the chair or Scott, if I had jumped into this, but yeah, we were looking at doing some White River Courthouse stuff. And then all of a sudden, then we had to find a rental space. And so that, yeah, so we'll bleed over at some point in time where their budgets will, you know, that will do it, but yes. So it isn't always just cut and dry, well, that's their side and that's that side, but because all the money is kind of, it's there, you only have so much money, so.
Yeah.
But your premise of what you've asked is right. Thank you.
And this is mostly all general fund. So you'll see there's not schools, and sometimes we do fund transportation. I think we should talk about it every time we do fund transportation because it has its own fund. But so this is general fund capital. And then I just want to mention too, the women's prison is not in here. And my recollection is the plan was to they are presuming that it's going to be far enough away that we can gather additional funds.
Yeah, we should be parking some money somewhere.
Yeah.
Doesn't that show in here when we're parking some money?
It wouldn't show in the capital bill, because capital bill is gonna be actual in. Here are the hammers and nails and the building we're working on today. But in the big bill, the big budget, you'll see money set aside for women's prison or other reserve funds. You might not necessarily see it here on this line.
To the chair's point, she made got a good point about what we do for transportation. We also, you're gonna see something with clean water, where we'll actually provide the monies for matches at some point at different times, where we have put dollars in. We've got like a 20-to-1 match coming back, so we'll fund those. We'll actually provide the funding for that, and then the dollars flow back in. So you'll see where we'll park some monies for that.
So
Right.
our clean water,
Which
you think it's water, but there's the infrastructure, right? But as somebody was mentioned, the federal government often, and I don't remember the numbers, maybe you said in the past, like,
Yeah, it's been like,
1
it's
to 10,
been
whatever.
12-to-1, it's been 20-to-1, it's been several different times where I think at one point in time, where we parked like 30 million. Oh, God, I don't even want to say it, but
Well, that was with the IIJ,
Right, you have-
and that's why we had the cash fund
Right,
and
you
make sure that
have-
we had money.
Several different times, we didn't leverage much dollars and got a ton back from the federal government. No things are fun.
So just one quick clarifier if I could, because so when you mentioned the cash might be used for engineering services or something like that. But then we said we don't have anything in here to deal with women's prison, even though we have activities going on in terms of looking for land and some services there, so they don't come out of the capital fund. And I'm just trying to see where the
Yeah.
separation line comes, because
Well,
sometimes.
we've had it.
No, good question. What it is what, and I made a note because I think it would be really good to look at the 10-year plan so that you could see the past as well as the projected future, because we've been out, like, the previous capital budget did have funding for the women's prison. They're using that funding now, but you don't see that
Aside.
on this, right?
Because it's
Right.
current
We don't-
dollars and previous dollars.
Right, but I think it still is important for us to know what those balances are for some of these projects.
So Vince, you showed me you had a binder earlier.
Yeah,
I think in that binder, which is provided by the governor's office, is it's a plan that says a 10-year plan. So I think in there, and if I'm not gonna say, 'cause I don't have that binder, but I think one of the things that have in there does show our idea for 10 years is here's money that we're gonna set aside for the women's prison, and we're gonna build a giant tower for Gray or what, who knows? And
There was one, but
it may have been, this binder is now a year old.
yeah,
So it may have gotten some usage, but I know they're gonna be, Commissioner Manoli will probably give us another brand new one for this year that will have all those different things in it that lists out. Maybe the finance manager will give us that 10-year plan for what the governor has in mind. Here's what we're gonna do. We need to say, we need to have $100 million. Well, 10 million a year is a lot easier for 10 years than 100 million at the end of the 10-year time period.
and
This particular, you might not see that the money we put aside because this is doing it today.
Got it.
But we should get a list of the balances of,
Previous
projects
capital
like that. I mean, not everything has a.
Yeah.
A separate account. Good question. And helping you get up to speed is one of the reasons for this meeting, so please ask for anything.
When we move on to the section 4, Commerce and Community Development, some of this is major maintenance at statewide historic sites. You have your Calvin Coolidge site, you know, all the different other places. They also need to have, you know, the building checked for rodents over the winter and heating on and that kind of stuff. Run underwater historic preserves. There's some great things in Lake Champlain that we make sure we keep preserved. Just trying to think of other things we talk about. Roadside historic markers. I want to say, if my memory recalls, it's like $3,000 to $5,000 for every bronze plaque, something like that. I'd have to double check, so don't hold me an exact number. But the idea is this helps to pay for that. So they can erect the plaque that says this is a historic landmark across the state. So like it's not here. And then I think battle monument maintenance. In this particular case, we're looking at the safety fencing that went around the monument, as the monument is going through some issues. There are other plans to help save the monument, but you know, this is just some of what we might do. So this is not the only thing that would be going to help the benefit around the monument, but this is in part for some of the stuff that we do. Then we get into the section 5, which is the building community grants. These are grant programs that essentially could look and say, I have a great idea. General Standard happens to be buried up in Georgia, Vermont, which is my hometown. His grave site is a little bit overgrown. I would like to install, you know, another private fencing around it, whatever. I'd like some money for that. I'm going to apply to this program, and that program could help me do that. Great. For that grant program is funded in part through the capital bill. So we can see we've given some money to all these different individual items. The historic park preservation, cultural facilities grant. There are 7 of them, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. If you want to learn more specifically about each of the grant programs, then I have to point you to the agency that does it and what the requirements are. I don't know off the top of my head or anything. But these are ones that will help preserve and keep our great state along. Christine for years. And again, we can see in this case, we have $300,000 for each one of these grants in FY26. Let's have $300,000 for each of these grants in FY27. So a total of $4.2 million in this particular section. The total capital bill bond in dollars was $100 million. When we get to the end, I'll show you where that number, what we're actually at and why that number. You can see $100 million, there's $74 million on specifically.
And let me just add a couple of things. So in these grants, we don't decide who gets the grants. We just decide on the total amount, which is really important. We'll see samples of the folks who receive the grants just to know what's happening, which is, I think that's a good way to do it. And a couple of these were lower. Most of them have been at 300,000 level, which to me is very low for the entire state, because we have a wonderful historic assets. But we have been able to at least keep it at the 300,000. And I think we raised a couple of them that were maybe at 250 to 300.
I'd have to go back and watch my own testimony from a year ago.
Oh yeah, you don't need to do that. It's just,
But I was just saying, I think the governor recommended back then, they had lowered some things down to 200 or 250, or maybe it was the House, I don't remember. But this committee said, you know what, we really want to increase that back up to the $300,000 that had been historically. Well, the tricky part about that, where I come in, is how balancing this. Well, if you're going to take something, you know, 7 items, and we're going to raise each of them $100,000, that's $700,000 we have to find. So where can we pull it from? What can we do? And when I go back and look at it, see how it's repointing and say we're going to lower that by 500,000, lower this 500,000, whatever it happens to be. You all make that decisions, and then I keep track of the numbers. So at the end of the day, we have a balanced capital bill. We don't spend more than we had or didn't, or, you know, we spend less this year, we spend more next year. This next section here was the Vermont Veterans Home. Again, they have a couple different projects they're working on specifically. They had this design and construction renovation of the A wing. They have 3 different wings. I think it's American, A, B, and C, but each one stands for, I don't remember. I should have memorized that just in case you asked that question. But they
Maybe
do have
Battle of Bennington.
somebody. They're gonna yell at me like, Scott, how come you can't remember that? But what we did there was we put money in FY 27. There's nothing because renovation in theory we worked on now. And so there is renovation 1.5 million in CAD for FY 26. And what'll happen is throughout the course of this session, we'll come back, they'll come in, they'll testify, and they'll say, hey, we did the renovation and we got it done for $500,000. So there's extra $1 million that we can then reallocate to something different. But they'll come back and say, we opened up the walls, we found mold, we found mice, we found, you know, old copper wires that have to all be redone, who knows? And then we'll come back and say we need 2.5 million. Who knows? I don't know. We'll find out in a couple of weeks when the governor gets to us. And then when they come in and they testify. Section 7, University of Vermont, we have been giving them money for a long time. Again, looking back, that 10-year plan is what we have been giving them and what we plan on giving them for the future. But that they'll come in and testify if things are good. Vermont State Colleges, I believe that this is one of those areas where in years past we had done the same amount of money as we had done for UVM. And I'd have to look at, again, last year's testimony, just as an example of mechanically how this all works. We looked at the Vermont State Colleges and we had lowered that to match what UVM was getting or raise it to match what UVM was getting. I can't remember what we had done. With the idea being having some parity between the University of Vermont and the other state colleges. And again, this is money that they would use for different things, not only statewide construction maintenance and stuff, but specifically in Johnson having the central heating plant replaced. And part of this is really kind of what they have done at, as an example, building and general services would say, if we're going to replace this, I need $1 million now, but then we need to get the contractors involved and we're going to need more money in the future. So you might see something like this where we have 1.5 million in FY 26 bonded, but 3.5 million in FY 27 bonded. Part of that is just the planning phase of any project, as I'm sure you're aware, for engineering purposes. This section 9, the A&R, this is where we do get some more issues of sub areas, if you will. So within, I'm trying to say, how do I say this? Within the agency, there are departments, right? So we have DEC, which is the Department of Environmental Conservation, and then FDR, Department of Course, Parks and Rec. That's where we have DEC and FDR. Before you saw statewide or Bronx and that kind of stuff. Same thing within A&R, they have subsets, if you will. And those subsets might be giving money for different things. And again, they will come in and they'll testify as to what they did, what they need money for, what they're going to do in the future. And they might come in and say, hey, we're all done, we don't need any more money. So sometimes to Harrison's point, in the past, you may have seen 7 more forest, Parks and Rec, or Fish and Wildlife requests on here, but it's not on here anymore. That's because they came in, they got their money, they did the project, we're all good, and they'll fall off the capital bill for the 3-year period before this capital bill. But with that said, you know, historically in the past, how much money have we given to Fish and Wildlife? We have to go back and look for previous capital years. Section 10 is clean water. This is all the water quality grants. So there's lots of different things here. This is where Senator Ingalls was saying earlier, we can get a match sometimes. So you do $1 and you get 10 back, kind of a thing. One thing I would point out is in column B, you will see dollars allocated across these different individual items. But in column D, there's basically nothing until we get to line 89, which is clean water FY 27 Northwest. Essentially, the Clean Water Board, is that their name?
Mhm.
Thank you, Senator Harrison. They will make a recommendation as to, well, we think we need to have money in one of these other sections up above it, right? So right now, we just set aside $10 million in the capital bill, but we don't know where we're gonna allocate it because we haven't had that recommendation as of yet. And I think that will come together, a recommendation as well, and he'll say, okay, well, great. Of that 10 million, I want you to put 3 million on line 2 and 4 million on line 3 and 1 million on line 4. So right now, it's just that 10 million is a placeholder. So you will see a line on 89, basically, for lack of a better word, disappear. And it will now be reallocated into lines, 82, 83, and 4. So you'll kind of see that mechanism as you go through the next iteration of the report.
And these are mostly matching funds. They may be all matching funds. The federal.
I have to double check. Section 11, our military, we have all of our military darts and those kind of things that will basically help take care of them as well. And then we'll say people will be more Cam Johnson over the so. Section 12, Aids of Agriculture. Senator Ingles might know a lot about that because there's other role as chair of agriculture. But here down in Massachusetts, there is the Asian State Exposition, and in Vermont, there's a giant classic grandiose building for the exposition, and they have a fair every year.
One actually owns the building in Massachusetts.
So interesting. So we take care of funding that, and I know that
Senator Rangers, the governor of this building.
got it. That building has some challenges to it with all these things, right? Making sure we have some ADA compliance and putting in like an elevator for taking to the second floor, some of those things. But again, they can come in and I think they have an actual model they can show you what they're doing. But if there happens every year, they always invite you down.
It's fun. Traffic is crazy, but fair's fun.
Department of Public Safety, again, you have the Rutland Field Station. This is where your police barracks, right? In Rutland and Shasberry, you're doing some planning and design for some of these things. Again, this is, you'll see bonded cash, both FY 26 and FY 27. Judiciary here, again, same idea, right? There are some different courthouses that need some work. Some of them have specific things. Senator Ingles, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the courthouses last year, they didn't need the money anymore, so we had a plan, didn't do the plan anymore. So now it's no longer on this year's capital bill because they went through, 3 or 4 years ago, it was on the capital bill. They were like, hey, we're not gonna do this project. So we can reallocate that money in other places. I forget where that was, it was Newport, yeah. And then Vermont Rural Fire Protection, the dry hydrant program, they'll come in. What's that was in Troy, the hydrant guy? I can't remember his name.
Oh, right. I don't know.
And then
Yeah.
talk all about the dry hydrant program, and
Yeah.
money for that. And then in section 16, the Vermont Historical Society, the building up the road. They needed some money last year.
Yeah, for that building, the water was coming into the building. Hopefully they're working on it already. It was bad.
So if you look at the bottom of column B, we see total capital project 62 million in bonded dollars in FY 26. 13.5 million in cash FY 26. And almost 50 million in FY 27. Add them all together, you get 125 million and change. Earlier today, I said to you, the capital bonding was 100 million, so there's $25 million extra. Well, where did that money come from? Part of that came from the next section we're going to look at, which is reallocations. Part of that came from money that was allocated to the cash fund through a mechanism which is in the capital bill. I did write a report for the cash fund. You're looking to read. I should have printed a copy for you. So we do have some additional money above the bonding capacity because of other things. This next section starts to talk about those other things. Section 17 reallocations. I mentioned earlier the House Committee has a subcommittee, and they call it the repo committee. So we go and we claw back any money that's not being used. So the idea behind that is any money that's older than 2 years, we're gonna go check with the agency and say, hey, we gave you some money a few years ago for this project. Did you use it? Are you not gonna use it? What's the deal? You have plans for it, you just haven't spent it yet because you couldn't get a contract signed because you went and did a bid and your RFPs came back and they were all too high, but you still have plans to use this money. So there could be some other things going on there, but at the end of the day, they might come back and say, hey, Scott, you know what? Here's $5 million. We don't need this money. So you can see here, lines 133 through 154, basically. These are all monies that have been given back to the capital bill because plans have changed or they decided to not go forward with the project, whatever happens to be. The estimate was too high. Who knows?
I assume that if they may still want to do the project, but they aren't going to do it within the time frame of this budget.
It really kind of depends a little bit. I can't speak to all the different agencies, but they might come through and say, we were given $10,000 for this one project and we've got, $13 left. And then this other project, we had 20,000, then I had 1,000 left and they kind of bumped them all together. So you can see, I think on some of these, does it say that? Line 141, you'll see BGS, then various projects. So those various projects may have been a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I can't speak to what each project is necessarily, but I have to go look things up. But if you look at that line item, you'll see BGS and you see a number. That number is what's called the department ID, which speaks to the specific project. So I can go in the back end and look at that specific project to figure out what that project was. But they might have, I can see here, there's $112 left over from, looks like the Memorial Valley Rail Trail. And that could be just leftover money, like we estimated 50,000, we only needed 49,312. I saw one report recently that one particular department ID number, there was like 3 cents left over. Yeah, I'm gonna go ask them, do you need it? Do you can use it? And then we're gonna get it back and you'll probably see it on this report here in the next 3 months, right? Because it's part of the repossession, the repo, clawback committee, is gonna look at that. And maybe they've changed plans, like for instance, they may have decided that like with the courthouse in Newport, the project we didn't decide we don't need to do it anymore, or we found some federal grant money or something else somewhere else. We don't need the money from the capital bill. So a lot of that is behind this, not behind the scenes, but outside of the realm of what we know here as to why this isn't necessarily all spent. Could be they just decide to cancel the project, could be they found more money, could be any number of things. But they will come, they'll report to us and say, here's the money that we think you can have back. And what we did was we took that roughly $6.7 million from this reallocation and we added it to the $100 million. We said, great. Now instead of only having $100 million across 2 years, I have $106 million across 2 years. I did point out to you earlier, though, that the total spent money was $125 million. So where'd the extra money come from? If we look at the next section here, we have some section 18 general obligation bond capacity. So the bond premium, you can see here essentially line 159, column B, column D, there's $50 million in each line. That's a $100 million bonding capacity. The bond premium is essentially, it's a little more complex than this, but just to give you a very layman's point of view, if you were to sell your bond at a higher value than the par value, that extra money you're getting for the bond, your bond premium, more complex than that. But essentially, if there's a demand for the Vermont state bonds, the price goes up, we can get a premium because that's where the extra $6 million came from, almost $7 million here as part of that. Then we also have the cash fund sources down below here in the line 165, 166, 167. So the cash fund, there's some fund interest. The fund was funded with $22 to $25 million over the course of the past couple of years. That money earns some interest until you spend the money. So that interest comes back to the capital bill, so we can use that as well. There's also stipulation in the the way the mechanics work for the cash fund is that the cash fund can receive up to 4% of previous year's appropriations. So that money would be given to us, recommended from the governor to say, hey, here's some more money for you. So you can see that on line 165, the annual GF general fund transfer, 9.6 million plus there's interest. So we talked about when we had 100 million, but we spent 125. Well, there's money from the reallocations, there's money from the interest in the cash fund, there's money from the cash fund transfer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of the day, we can see on line 172, total capital fund projects, roughly 62 million. Total capital funding in line 173 and looking column B, 61.9 million. So the way this happens to be, we're spending $4,000 more in FY26, and then we're going to spend $4,000 less in FY27. So at the end of the day, if I did my math right, the final number you'll see is 0. So everything balancing it out. Such your long-winded, convoluted number story, I'm sure. I'll put the line.
That's good.
Good.
You did a good job.
Thank you. Specific questions I might not be able to answer about specific sections, but I'm happy to reach out to someone if you have a specific question. But mechanically, you can see how the spreadsheet works. That ties to this. If you go and look through this, you will see specifically it'll say, try to find something there quickly. Following some of the program FY27 for building community grants, and it has to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, Division for Historic Preservation Grant Program, $300,000. Again, for Historic Barn Preservation, $300,000. So all this stuff is listed here. It's on the spreadsheet. Sometimes the spreadsheet's easier to read. Sometimes the bill of language has a little bit more to the descriptor as to what it is. The language is also important because at the back of the language, after you get through all the dollar amounts, you'll see other things. I'm trying to think. In here, we did add a request, section 22A, cash fund joint fiscal office report. So in the language, there was a part of the bill that required my office to put together a report on the cash fund. So this is where you have other things that are happening.
Have that report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Section 23, transfer of Randall Meadow property in the town of Waterbury. That ran through the the capital bill, but that's not on the spreadsheet because it doesn't have anything to do with any money. This is a transfer of property. So there's some other things here in the language that are not necessarily captured on the spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet deals with just the dollars in, dollars out. My wife doesn't like it when I get home because my voice is now tired of talking. And
Oh.
talking.
Well, the veteran town,
Mhm.
the other two are Brandon and Cardinal,
Oh, thank you.
because remembering what happened was they were going to renovate the Brandon and Cardinal units, so they're shown on the reversions.
Yeah.
Because that ended up being not as feasible as renovating the
The
American.
American way. Yeah.
Great.
Oh, that was very helpful.
Good. Great. Wonderful. There's some complexities in here that as you go through, you can look at and see. It will hopefully, this will give you the framework to make it make better sense. What will happen is I will have a spreadsheet from the governor, which the House will start working on the phone. And then we'll have the House sections, and then I'll add another section on the right-hand side for the Senate, what we're going to do in this room, make the Senate changes. And then I'll add another group on the side for all the stuff we agree to. And then when it's all said and done, it'll coalesce back down to this. So you'll see the spreadsheet get bigger and smaller, and more columns. And I was saying to Senator Major earlier, once you see the font size being like 30, that's when it's time for me to get my glasses out. I can't see.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Diane. My pleasure. Anything else I can do then
Well,
for you?
let's think about when we want to talk about the cash fund and that cash fund report.
Sure.
Maybe the next, I mean, there's no urgency. I mean, there might be some, or I'd like to do it the next couple of weeks.
And what you'd want to see the governor's budget to see if he put some more cash in the
Yeah,
cash fund. I mean,
yeah.
because, I mean, if I remember correctly, last year, he said that, this is a starting point for the capital bill and we'd see if there could be an adjustment in the second biennium, so.
Yeah.
Right, right. But then there's some policy, potential things that I want to
I'm
talk to y'all
hoping that
about.
he can find his way to, put some more monies in. I mean, a few years ago, we had 203 million, we're down to 125 million, so. And the needs aren't going away, so, it would be nice, it would be nice to
Yeah,
see some more back in there.
right, right. And the report shows 0.
And
Well, I mean, I'm talking about all total funds.
Yeah, yeah.
A few years ago, we had
Yeah.
203
In the
million.
cash fund.
No, with all total funds.
Right, but I'm just saying in the
Fund,
cash fund,
right,
it's 0
Right,
now.
okay,
right now, we've allocated everything that was in the cash fund.
right.
So, so that's, I'll make sure you get a copy of the cash fund report. But I did a potentially overly simplistic version of in FY 24, FY 25, 26, 27, money in and money out of the cash fund. And it shows that basically any money that's come in, we have spent it, for lack of a better word. Technically, that some of that money may not have, the check might not have cleared yet, but we have positioned projects to spend that money on. And so that'll be a matter of when we get the government recommendation, come back and they'll say, hey, guess what? We said we're gonna spend $1 million, we only spent 900,000, so maybe some extra money there. But who knows, maybe they need more money. But when they give us that report in a couple of weeks, we'll know better as to what has changed or not changed.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
I don't think it's very good. Yeah, straightforward.
Thank you for your time.
You are welcome. My pleasure. I'll get out of
I hope
here.
your voice gets.
Hey, as long as your laundry folding abilities don't go away. you're fine.
Exactly. And dishes and trash.
Yeah. they-
All right. You're valuable still. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Great
you
day.
very
Have a good
much.
weekend, Scott.
Okay, so well, now let's, yes, let's stop. Or, I'm sorry, hold on just 1 sec. Let's adjourn for now. I'll let John Gray know, we'll let John Gray know that, we're finished for now. And so I think it might make sense for him to come another day rather than, because it's 50 minutes, it's almost an hour. Before he was supposed to be available. Does that work for everybody?
Yes, absolutely.
And then is there anything else you want to talk about today?
Just, are we gonna, the agendas would be helpful if we could post them online or whatever, as far as what the meetings are.
Oh, sure. I thought we
Yeah.
were, but maybe we're not.
No, there should be a line.
No, they're not. I don't have anything since Tuesday unless I had them for the week. Oh, a second. Okay, hold on. It just refreshed. I refreshed it twice and I didn't do it. So Friday right here. Okay, so I had Scott on here.
And then John Gray's on there too, actually,
Yeah.
too. But I think he's on from 3 o'clock.
Okay,
Well, actually, it doesn't say his time,
okay,
but we can just explain that. I mean, I'm explaining it now.
there we go.
But, yes, we had, we're new. What I'm going to ask, Ken to do is make sure that you have certain, materials. I mean, everything that we're gonna talk about is on the website,
Mhm.
but, so I don't want to overwhelm you, but I also want to make sure that you have information at least the day before.
Yeah,
If we're
absolutely.
gonna talk about it. And so, what I'd like to do is send you emails on that, okay? And it'll either be a link or an attachment.
Sure.
All right, and suggestions are always welcome, but yay, we finished week 1. Thank you, everybody.